if we can reconvene, that would be great. So if we can have you take your seats. I see the senator walking in right now. Please take your seats. We'll get started. Senator Coons, we're so happy that you could join us. You have been introduced. You have been introduced as our first vice chair and as our champion on energy efficiency and all the other good things that I typically say about you. And we're all just delighted that you made the time, again, coming from a vote directly over here, probably a few beads of sweat on the forehead from it. So please come up and be welcome to the stage of EE Global.
Is Portman coming right behind you?
Yes, he's coming right behind you.
And do you have a light here? Let's see if we have a light. We don't have a light, but that's good. Kateri, thank you so much for what you do and for what the Alliance to Save Energy does, your terrific staff, and this important annual conference. Yes, I'm a little out of breath. I literally was running from a vote on the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill, which is moving forward and which I'm very excited about. That deserves a round of applause. And when Senator Portman gets here, I think you can give him a big round of applause as well, because he has also worked tirelessly on energy efficiency legislation that is moving forward. I take enormous encouragement from the fact that there are literally hundreds of leaders from the private sector, the public sector, from nonprofits, from international organizations, and from American organizations gathered here to continue to send a consistent message that we are working together to make an integrated 21st century clean energy world a possibility. That we're not studying this in an abstract or an academic way, that we're building the regulatory, the financing, the legal, the statutory framework to deploy and to support a whole new generation in energy efficiency and in clean energy. When I spoke here just a year ago, I was at that point optimistic, hopeful that we might be able in the Senate to advance a comprehensive energy bill. And I'll remind you, since 2007, the Senate had not passed a comprehensive energy bill that had then had a path forward towards enactment. And by a vote of 85 to 12, the Energy Policy Modernization Act made it through the Senate. It's a bill that's going to have, that's worth a round of applause. And I don't know if he's made it here yet, but Senator Rob Portman of Ohio has some absolutely vital provisions in that bill that deserve a round of applause. Can you give Senator Portman a round of applause for what he got done in that bill that is so important for energy efficiency? So we should congratulate Senator Portman and Senator Shaheen, Senator Murkowski and Senator Cantwell, and Senator Isaacson and Bennett, whose SAVE Act was included as well, for all the significant advances in policy that are embedded in this bill. Some of my energy policy priorities are in there as well, thanks to the good bipartisan work of Senators Collins and Gardner, Shaheen and Reed. With me, I'm just going to briefly mention a few of them. Reauthorization for WAP for the Weatherization Assistance Program and a provision for innovation. Reauthorization of the State Energy Program, which together have helped millions of Americans in every state and territory over the last 40 years. WAP helps low-income families to make their homes more energy efficient, as I'm sure nearly all of you know, and the SEP leverages federal investments with state and local dollars to ensure that we can promote energy efficiency at the state and local level while developing new energy sources and reducing energy dependency. I also fought to include ESPCs, or Energy Savings Performance Contracts, and utility energy service contracts, the next $2 billion in order to keep moving forward on using these critical savings vehicles at no cost to taxpayers. Since the very first federal ESPCs were put in place back in 1992, these contracts have yielded over $13 billion in energy savings for the federal government. And as I've mentioned in the past, I got to use them both in the private sector and in local government, and was thrilled to team up with a number of Republican senators in moving this one step forward. We did clarify Senate budgeting rules on this last year, and I'm hopeful we can still make progress with the House to help further unleash ESPCs and UESCs. We also have in this bill that's passed the Senate some reforms to the national labs to make it easier for innovators to take new technologies, including energy efficiency relevant technologies, from the lab bench to the marketplace. and turning scientific discoveries into meaningful commercial breakthroughs is something I think we should all be excited about. The bill reauthorizes the energy title of the America Competes Act and specifically authorizes continued DOE R&D programs that are so critical, the Office of Science and ARPA-E. It also authorizes the QER, or the Quadrennial Energy Review, an interagency effort to develop a long-term energy strategy in which energy efficiency has to be a critical part. And the passage of this bipartisan Senate bill, in my view, shows there's a bipartisan understanding that promoting clean energy and energy efficiency in particular and growing our economy are not mutually exclusive. Despite our progress, we've still got more to do. I'll briefly mention the President's Power Africa initiative and the importance of bringing 600 million Africans into a world where electricity makes a difference in manufacturing, in education, in healthcare. Power Africa, I think, can continue to bring significant progress to a continent where I've spent a fair amount of time, but bringing clean and reliable power to Africa will depend on innovative public-private partnerships in which you can play a role as well. For nearly 40 years now, almost as long as programs like the Weatherization Assistance Program and the SEP have existed, the Alliance to Save Energy has played a vital, nonpartisan role in moving America towards a cleaner, more efficient energy, and your efforts have helped build and sustain the absolutely critical bipartisan support that have made this bill possible. We have more to do. Obviously, getting the energy bill through a conference with the House that maintains some of the vital energy efficiency provisions that I've referenced, moving the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill through the Senate without riders that would subject it to a veto without what are called poison pill riders, and I think we've made real progress on that today. To extend in advance clear tax and financing incentives like the Master Limited Partnership Parity Act, which some of you have heard me talk about at length, but would be the first ever level the playing field, a clean energy and energy efficiency financing provision, and hopefully at some point repealing sequestration because it's had a devastating effect on federal energy programs and investments in competitiveness and R&D. So if we can continue annually or more regularly to bring together the best minds and the best organizations in academia and business, in government, the nonprofit community, I think we can achieve all of this and more. This Friday, I'll be welcoming Secretary of Energy Ernie Moniz to the University of Delaware to show how my state is working to deploy a new generation of energy efficiency and energy generation technologies. Companies like Bloom Energy, GE, White Optics, DuPont, Johnson Controls, and others will be participating. There is a fabulous bill signing looking thing. Is that up? No, I can see it here and you can't see it there. That's a wonderful picture. There's a bill signing picture with Rob Portman looking very happy. I'm sorry, Kateri. I thought this was supposed to be up there behind me. I am very, very sorry. Let me wrap up by simply saying, then why is it down there, Kateri? I really didn't get the memo on this. Let me conclude by simply saying this. With patience and perseverance comes progress. And two senators who have had stunning patience and perseverance, Senator Shaheen of New Hampshire and Senator Portman of Ohio. I hope you will join me in welcoming to the stage a senator from Ohio. Kateri, are you going to introduce him, or can I simply welcome him up now? Having already ruined the surprise, I'm going to welcome him up. Ladies and gentlemen, we've worked on a number of pieces of legislation. He's one of the nicest, most thoughtful gentlemen in the United States Senate, and he has made a significant step forward with the passage through the Senate of this important bipartisan piece of energy legislation, a real genuine champion of energy efficiency. I hope you'll give a great round of applause to Senator Rob Portman of Ohio.
I know Senator Rob Portman, and I am no Rob Portman, but I want to join Senator Coons in just saying a couple of words about Senator Portman, our other first vice chair. Senator Portman has a long and distinguished career in both the House and the Senate. He began at the Congress on the House side in 1993 and spent 12 years there, and he was always reelected, and those folks for you from our international guests That means every 2 years he was running for election. He never once was reelected with a majority less than 70%. So I think that speaks volumes to what he's been able to do for the good citizens of Ohio. After leaving the Congress, he went to work as our U.S. Trade Representative, and then he also was director of OMB, the Office of Management and Budget. He truly is someone that has dedicated his entire professional career to public service of this country. He, like Senator Coons, was with the class of 2010, so he's up for re-election again. So if there happens to be anybody here from Ohio, and this is not a partisan call, this is a call for voting for an efficiency champion, cast your vote for Rob Portman in the upcoming election. Now we're going to put the picture up. Senator Portman people talk about the Congress not doing anything. Senator Portman has authored 50 bills that have been enacted into law, and one of them up here that Senator Coons talked about was S535, the Energy Policy Improvement Act that was signed into law just about a year ago. And I love this picture because unlike that terrible selfie you saw today, I actually got my whole face in this one. But this was a very, very important piece of legislation. It will save, when it's fully enacted, save American consumers and businesses $16.2 billion a year in 2030 and beyond. And it was also the first bipartisan energy bill, the first in 8 years of office for President Obama. President Obama was teasing the senator at the time of the signing because he kind of flubbed in his signature, and he said, I just need more practice. You all need to bring me more bills. Well, Rob Portman is the guy to do that, along with our honorary chair, Jeanne Shaheen. Senator Coons has already talked a bit about that, and Senator Portman will talk more. But again, it's worth 3 rounds of applause for the senator, and this will be the third. Please join me in welcoming Rob Portman.
Kateri, thank you very much. I think it's a great picture of Kateri, don't you? She actually wasn't there, but she has photoshopped photoshopped herself into the photo. The truth is, when he actually signed it, she was right behind him, and then she kindly moved over to let those congressional types sneak in, because Kateri and this group was incredibly crucial to this happening. I mean, it never would have happened without the people in this room and Kateri's personal passion for this issue, and her ability to work across the aisle, not in a nonpartisan way. Always, you know, she kind of sometimes, you know, knows who her favorites are, I suppose, but you know, in a totally bipartisan way, she has been able to reach across the aisle and to say this makes sense for all of us. I mean, why wouldn't we want to have a energy efficiency economy where we are all saving money and where we have the opportunity to not just help ratepayers pay a little less, but help the federal government spend less and be more energy independent? I mean, it's a great combination, isn't it? And so thank you very much to the Alliance and specifically to you, Kateri, for what you have done over 5 years. My buddy Chris Coons talked about perseverance and patience. 5 years of working to get to this point where we were able to pass the broader legislation in the Senate. And this legislation took, I guess, about 5 years to get to the President's desk. So let's give Kateri a round of applause. So Chris Coons is my friend. He also is a guy who likes to get stuff done. And, you know, he represents a more democratic state where he, frankly, you know, could engage in more partisan politics, and he'd probably be just fine for re-election. But he's a guy who says instead, you know, I got elected to actually make a difference. And so we're working on a student loan bill right now together. That was his bill that he's asked me to join him on. And this energy efficiency bill, he had a number of elements that he talked about earlier that were important to the bill. And generally was just a cheerleader for it. So, you know, helped Jeanne Shaheen and me to be able to get the Democratic leadership and the Republican leadership on the same wavelength that, you know, we had to have an opportunity to get this bill not just to the floor, which we did 3 times, but actually get it passed. 3rd time's a charm, they say, and that certainly was true for us. You know, if you were to tell the American people the United States Senate is able to pass a bill that is bipartisan, save taxpayers money, reduces our energy dependence on the rest of the world, creates jobs, and actually makes the government more efficient, they would probably say that never happens. You know, the United States Congress never does stuff like that. But that's exactly what what we did. And we've really done it 3 times now in the Senate. The 2 bills, one of which we saw at the signing ceremony, are now, the law of the land. And then this 3rd bill is the more comprehensive approach that is now over in the House. I'm not sure what's going to happen over there. Many of you are involved with this. We have H.R. 8 that's already passed over there, and that could be a vehicle for conference. We don't know for sure. It's also possible they could pass a more comprehensive bill and take it into conference. Frankly, I just want to get into conference. We need to get this done. And although a more comprehensive bill that perhaps took on some of our energy efficiency items that are not in the more narrow H.R. 8 would be a good thing, I also worry a little bit, frankly, about unraveling some of our good work we've done in the energy efficiency bill. And for those who are here from the private sector, we've worked very closely with the private sector and with the Department of Energy and with others over the past 5 years on these building codes. And Jean Shaheen, to her credit, has been willing to make a lot of concessions in particular. Again, this started 5 years ago. And I would hope that those who worked with us to be able to come up with a sensible compromise here would stick with us through the House and not allow this larger bill to be derailed with some differences over voluntary housing codes. So that's how I feel about it. I don't know how you feel about it. But I really think this is an opportunity for us to do something really important for the country. And, we're at that point now where it's kind of, in the House's hands, and that means it's in part in your hands because you can be effective advocates over there. I hope you will be. And tell them that this is something that we'd actually like to get across the finish line sooner than later. And again, getting into conference would be terrific. The number of groups supporting this legislation is truly impressive, 260 companies and associations. And it ranges from the Chamber of Commerce to the Sierra Club, not normal bedfellows. The one group that's in our coalition that, again, works with all sides is the Alliance to Save Energy. And the Alliance to Save Energy, again, manages to pull people in from the environmental community, the business community, the nonprofit community generally, and figure out how to get stuff done. And again, that's why I appreciate what you all do. The folks in the Congress who say their priority is a better economy, better wages, better benefits, which is most of us, certainly that's a high priority for me, have to look at this bill and say this is extraordinary. Because other legislation that does deal with emissions or does deal with the environmental concerns that all of us share do tend to have a negative impact on the economy. Not all of them, but many of them do. This one actually, when you do the analysis, and Alliance has helped us to do this analysis, in its entirety, it creates about 200,000 jobs. So think about this. We're actually using energy more efficiently. We are making the federal government more efficient, specifically in this legislation. We are taking steps to make us, again, more energy independent in this country. And we're creating about 200,000 jobs. I think that's a lowball figure because it doesn't include the increased competitiveness from the manufacturing sector, because as you know, one of the big things we do in this legislation is help our manufacturers to have better technologies to be able to compete with Europe, with Japan, with other countries that frankly have spent more time focused on efficiency because they've had higher energy prices over time. So I think the economic benefits here are understated, if anything. And again, this is something that will help give the economy a shot in the arm. It also saves consumers $16.7 billion annually by 2030. You think about that. That's just reduced energy costs. Some people have said to me, and my own caucus, some who didn't vote for the bill at the end, say, Rob, we don't need energy efficiency. We have all this production now. And it's true. America is really the superpower of energy production. And it's not just oil and gas, although I'm proud to say that Ohio is now, an energy state. We export energy. Over the last several years, we actually were number 2 in the country in terms of increased production of natural gas, and we're proud of that. But it's also solar. The technology in solar has improved dramatically, and we're becoming, a country that not just relies on it more, but technologically are continuing to push the envelope. Same with wind. Same with hydro. In this bill, the broader bill, we do some things in terms of hydro. So there's opportunity here, short of nuclear, which is not expanding, but still provides about 20% of the electricity. In Ohio, we have 2 very important plants. But we're an energy superpower now. So people say, well, why do you worry about efficiency? But this is the whole point. It's not the fact that energy costs are relatively lower now than they were 5 years ago when we started on this bill, which is true. It's the fact that this is the right combination of both producing more and using less. You know, that combination is what creates the jobs and gives us the economic edge and makes us more competitive and allows us to get back on track of letting people indeed have higher wages and better benefits and have a better life for their kids and grandkids, which is part of the frustration out there right now. So many people can't seem to get ahead. And we're desperately looking for stuff to give that economy a shot in the arm and to get the growth back up. Last quarter, 0.5% growth. And people, you know, say the unemployment numbers aren't bad. They're bad. It's not 5%. When you've got historically high levels of men being out of the workforce, the workforce participation rate among men is the lowest it's ever been. Men and women combined, you have to go back to the 1970s, which is not a time period we want to repeat with, you know, a weak economy and a recession. So this is a great opportunity, in my view. Republicans and Democrats alike ought to jump on it and say this is exactly what we need to do. Producing more energy than ever is great, but let's also use it much more efficiently. At a time when we have a tough time figuring out how to get things done in Congress on a bipartisan basis, again, this is a great example of getting together and actually helping to clean up the environment at the same time to create these jobs. The emissions impact of this legislation is the equivalent, they say, of taking 20 million cars off the road over a 15-year period. Someone told me recently that's not right, it's only 18 million. I said, well, that's great. I mean, that's still a lot of cars. But, you know, that's another thing about this legislation, again, as compared to other bills where there's a lot of, you know, partisanship and fury and disagreement. Is here we were able to find how to find people to come together to do something that's good for the environment in addition to creating jobs. Chris Coons said it well. You know, these are two objectives we all share, and they are not mutually exclusive. On the federal government side, it does help the federal government, as I say, practice what it preaches, in the sense it requires the federal government to do more in terms of energy efficiency. But it's more than that. I think we should lead by example in the federal government. We probably, in our federal government, we're the biggest energy user in America, which means we're the biggest energy user in the world. And so there's a great opportunity here for us to do more. And part of that is what this legislation does. So, again, some Republicans who weren't wild about this legislation, its impact on the private sector, by the way, where there are no mandates, it's incentives, not mandates. But how could you argue against looking at our own federal government and saying, shouldn't we be doing better in terms of the amount of money being spent at federal buildings, call centers, and so on? And that's what this legislation does. It also does this, though, at the state and local level of government. You think about it, because updating these building codes for government buildings is going to be really important. It also provides for retrofitting hospitals, youth centers, faith-based organizations with energy efficiency improvements. That's in this legislation. So that's helpful for the nonprofits and our state and local levels in our communities. It gets rid of some of the duplicative green building programs at the Department of Energy, which I think is an important step so people will use it more. I live in a LEED certified, silver certified home. It's darn confusing for those of you who've been through this process, and it's good, I think, to have more simplification. It also establishes a federal smart building program to conduct research and development on smart building technology, which I think is important. It codifies in statute that federal agencies must reduce their energy intensity 2.5% per year over the next decade. And there's plenty of room to do that. If you walk into the halls and of the buildings, even here in Washington, D.C., that have not been retrofitted, that are older buildings, there's a huge opportunity here in the federal government. As we're telling other people to do it, we ought to be sure we do it in our own government. The legislation also provides for low-income Americans to retrofit their homes to be more energy efficient. Helps them to save money on the energy bills, of course. And that's important for a lot of people. I mean, the middle-class squeeze, again, is real. Wages are flat. People see higher health care costs and higher energy costs. Even with the lower cost overall of energy, a lot of people, including my home state of Iowa, are seeing electricity costs actually inch up. And so this will help in terms of low-income Americans who do want to have more efficient homes and can do so. The issue of the SAVE Act, you know, got kicked around. Some of you know a lot about this. And I'm going through this just to give you a sense of what's in the bill, because it's a little more complicated and more extensive than I think some people believe, and it really will make a difference. And again, the House could pass sort of a skeletal version, but it wouldn't be good enough. We've got to include these provisions and others. On the SAVE Act, which is another one that Chris Coons supported, which I appreciate, Johnny Isakson took the lead on that. It was part of our legislation. So Gene and I had it in the bill, the Portman-Shaheen bill, the Shaheen-Portman bill before that, but it was not within the jurisdiction of the Energy Committee, so we had to have a separate vote on that on the floor of the Senate. And it was a tough vote. It looked easy at the end because we won with a little margin, but I will tell you, you know, we worked it hard. And John Isaacson worked it hard, as did Mike Bennett, Chris Coons, and others. And that legislation I really like because it helps us to do something which I think will maybe have a longer-term effect that is as important as anything in the bill, and that's to allow the Federal Housing Administration mortgages to take into consideration the cost savings of energy efficiency home improvements when determining how much a mortgage applicant can afford. So this is an interesting way to encourage more efficiency that I think is going to, again, have some important impacts, and that's called the SAVE Act. It also reauthorizes the Weatherization Assistance Program and establishes these building training and assessment centers at institutions of higher education, helps in terms of training for energy efficiency workers, which is one of the gaps that we found around the country, and it is a skills gap right now. So again, there's a lot in this legislation, and Chris has talked about some other things I'm not going to mention because he's already mentioned them, and there's some performance contracts and so on. It's worth fighting for. So again, I would ask you not to stop celebrating what we did in the Senate. That was great, and you should all take a bow, but that's just a start. We've got to get this through the House. We've got to get it into conference. We've got to get it to the President's desk where he will sign it. At this signing ceremony, we'll be sure that Kateri gets a better position behind the President. Again, I don't know exactly what's going to happen in terms of the process over there, whether it's H.R. 8 or whether it's a broader bill. But one thing I do know, and that is that this is a no-brainer. We need to get this passed. And if we do, we will be giving the economy a shot in the arm. We will be helping in terms of our independence, which is a national security issue. We will be helping in terms of giving people an opportunity to get ahead that they don't have now. And we'll be making our environment a cleaner, more healthy environment. What's wrong with that? So thank you and God bless.
Okay, we have our marching orders. We're all going to descend on the U.S. House of Representatives and work really hard to get the Portman-Shaheen bill through and to the President's desk. But before we do that, we have a reception this evening, and I hope you'll take the opportunity to network. And we have a full day planned tomorrow. We'll start promptly at 9 o'clock back in this room with a plenary session, and then we have executive dialogues all day. I thank you for being with us and hope that you have enjoyed the day and learned as much as I have. And I look forward to having the Alliance, thanks to the generosity of all of our sponsors, buy you all a drink and a little bit of food. So please eat, drink, be merry, enjoy your evening. Thank you.